Imagine being invited to your high school
She
reunion,
walks in
but the
and
invitation
everyone is in
nothing
shock.
more than a cruel trap. A plan to humiliate you in front of everyone. Now picture walking into that hall, where the laughter is sharp, the stares are cold, and every whisper carries your name. But instead of breaking, you rise, shimmering, unstoppable. And suddenly the ones who planned your downfall are the ones trembling. What happens when the victim becomes the storm? And the night that was meant to shame her turns into the night they will never forget. Stay with me because this is not just a reunion. This is a reckoning. Asterisk, they invite her to their high school reunion to humiliate her. But when she shows, up the hall glowed with golden lights. Glittering against the polished floor, laughter bounced across the room. Sharp and echoing like glass-breaking groups huddled together. Whispering behind glossy smiles, she stepped inside. Her heels tapping a steady rhythm that cut through the noise. The scent of perfume mixed with the heavy sweetness of spiced wine. Eyes turned, first in casual curiosity. Then in sudden silence, her dress shimmered, silver and fluid. Catching every spark of light, they had planned for her to stumble, to shrink beneath their cruel stares. But she stood taller. Her presence unsettling, almost electric. A hush spread wider. Pressing against the walls, the very air seemed to thicken. Charged and waiting. She let her gaze travel across the familiar faces. Once they had laughed at her, pushed her aside, written her name on bathroom walls. Now their grins faltered. Their confidence cracked. Her smile was calm, almost knowing every step she took sounded louder, like a drumbeat inside the stunned silence. And when she reached the center of the room, she paused. The chandeliers above flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Something unseen shifted, a ripple in the air. As if the room itself held its breath, their mocking plan had twisted into something they could not control. And the shock on their faces deepened when she finally opened her mouth. Asterisk. Her voice was soft at first, yet it carried through every corner of the hall. I see you remember me. The words slid like ice across their skin, leaving shivers in their wake. Some tried to laugh, but the sound cracked, brittle and hollow. She tilted her head, her eyes catching the trembling glow of the chandeliers. I remember you too. The silence thickened, suffocating as though the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. Her fingers brushed the edge of the glass she held, the crystal ringing faintly in the stillness, every detail sharpened in their senses. The faint creak of the floorboards, the uneven breaths, the scent of fear rising beneath layers of perfume. One man shifted uncomfortably, the chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. She smiled at him, and his face drained of color. You thought tonight would belong to you, she said, her tone slow and deliberate. The crowd swallowed hard, their throats dry, their eyes darting nervously, but she stood at the center, unshaken, her presence pulling them tighter into her grip. And then, without warning, the chandelier above them swayed. The crystals clinked together, a chilling music that silenced even the smallest whisper. Her gaze lifted toward it, and when her eyes returned to them, they were no longer the same. Asterisk, they gleamed with a depth that made every soul in the room flinch, cold, endless, like a storm brewing far beyond human reach. A woman near the front pressed a hand to her mouth. Her breath caught halfway between a gasp and a scream. The chandeliers trembled harder, scattering shards of light that danced eerily across their faces. She raised her hand slowly, and the murmurs died at once. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to fall into the rhythm of her silence. You laughed at me once, she whispered. Yet the whisper thundered in their ears. You thought I was weak. The floor beneath their feet shuddered, a faint tremor running through the polished wood. Glasses rattled on the tables. The wine inside quivering like blood, panic flickered in their eyes. But none dared move. Her silver dress shimmered brighter as though alive, bending the light around her, and when she stepped closer, the temperature dropped, chilling the air until breath turned visible. The hall that had been, filled with warmth and music, now felt like a tomb, and still. She smiled, as if their fear was the very thing she had been waiting for. Asterisk, her smile widened, slow and deliberate, revealing nothing, yet promising everything. Someone in the back stumbled, the sound of shoes scraping against the floor echoing like thunder. No one turned to help. All eyes stayed fixed on her. Drawn by a force they could not name, her voice returned, low and smooth, each word cutting deeper than the last. "You gave me pain." Her hand hovered in the air, fingers slightly curled as if grasping something invisible, and now she whispered, "I will give it back." A gust of wind rushed through the hall. Though no doors had opened, candles flickered violently, their flames bending toward her as if pulled. The chandeliers rattled again, this time with a violent shiver that sent tiny crystals raining down. They shattered on the floor, sharp pieces glinting under the trembling lights. A scream finally tore through the silence, high-pitched and raw, breaking the last thread of composure in the room. Chairs scraped back. Shoes slid, but the crowd's movements were clumsy, frantic. It was as though the room itself resisted their escape, holding them in place, and at the center, she stood perfectly still, her eyes burning brighter with every heartbeat they wasted in terror. Asterisk, the brightness in her eyes spread, a glow that no longer looked human. It spilled across her face, tracing her features in silver fire. The crowd froze, some mid-step, as though time itself had thickened around them, their voices caught in their throats. Strangled by an unseen grip, she lowered her hand, and the wind died, leaving a hollow silence. Only the sound of glass cracking beneath their trembling. Feet filled the air. Her gaze moved from one face to the next, slow, deliberate, savoring their terror. "You wanted me small," she said, her voice deepening, echoing against the very walls. "You wanted me broken." The lights above flickered violently, plunging the room into stuttering shadows. Every flicker showed their faces twisted in fear, their eyes wide and pleading. The silver of her dress rippled, almost alive, as if threads of light were weaving themselves around her body. She raised both arms now, palms open, her silhouette towering, commanding. The air grew heavier, pressing down on their chests until breath became shallow and painful. And in that unbearable silence, she smiled once more, sharper, colder. The room was hers, and they finally understood that nothing about this night had gone according to their plan. Asterisk, her smile lingered, stretching thin as if carved into her face by something beyond mercy. The chandeliers above flared once, then went black, plunging the hall into darkness. Gasps erupted, sharp and panicked, followed by the frantic shuffle of feet, but no one could see the doors. The exits had vanished into shadow. A faint hum began to rise, low and vibrating, crawling through the floorboards and up their legs. They clutched at their chests, each breath ragged, each heartbeat louder than the last. From the darkness, her outline shimmered, glowing faintly like embers under ashdot. Her voice emerged again, steady and cruelly calm. "You thought tonight would be your stage." The glow around her pulsed, spreading wider, bathing their terrified faces in pale light. "But it has always been mine." The hum grew louder, a resonance that rattled teeth and bones, until it seemed the very walls might crack. One man dropped to his knees, hands covering his ears, his scream swallowed by the rising sound. Another stumbled backward, only to find the wall cold and smooth where the door had once been. They were trapped, caged by something far greater than their cruelty. And she stood in the center, radiant, unstoppable, as if the years of silence had been nothing more than fuel for this moment. Asterisk, the glow swelled, wrapping her in a halo of shifting light that flickered like fire and ice. Every shadow bent toward her, stretching unnaturally across the walls, reaching like grasping hands. The hum shifted into a deep vibration, rattling glasses until they burst, shards scattering across the floor. The air tasted metallic now, sharp and bitter on their tongues, as though they breathed in lightning. Their eyes watered, their throats burned, yet they could not look away. She took one slow step forward, and the floor creaked, not from her weight, but from something vast pressing beneath it. Her gaze locked on the group nearest to her, the ones who had whispered the cruelest lies in school corridors, their faces drained of color. Every smirk, long gone, replaced by trembling lips and wide, desperate eyes. "Do you remember?" she asked softly, her tone slicing through the chaos like a blade. "Every word, every laugh, every wound you carved into me." Her glow intensified, silver spilling into the cracks between the floorboards. Crawling toward their feet, one woman screamed, hopping back as the light licked at her shoes, searing the leather black. But the light followed, alive, slithering. Hungry, the crowd pressed tighter against the walls. But the walls gave no escape, and in the heart of their terror, her smile deepened as if justice itself had finally stepped into the room. Asterisk. The silver light surged, curling around their ankles like smoke made solid. They kicked and clawed at it, but it clung stubbornly, burning cold against their skin. The smell of singed fabric filled the air, sharp and suffocating. Someone shouted her name, pleading, but the sound cracked under the weight of the trembling room. Her eyes gleamed brighter, reflecting their terror back at them. "You wanted a show," she said, her voice layered, echoing as though more than one spoke through her. "Now you will watch." The chandeliers above flared back to life. It's not golden, but harsh white, searing and merciless. Every crack in their fear was exposed under that light. Every trembling hand, every tear. The silver tendrils snaked higher, weaving up legs, coiling like serpents. Each movement of the light sent jolts through their bodies, making them shudder violently. She raised her hand again, and the tendrils froze, taut as wire, holding them upright like puppets. The room fell silent, save for their ragged breathing and the faint hum of the glowing floor. Her head tilted, curious, almost playful, as she studied them. "For years," she murmured, "you made me crawl." Her hand tightened into a fist, and the tendrils snapped tighter. "Now," she whispered, "you will kneel." Asterisk. The sound came first, a chorus of knees striking the polished floor in unison. The echo rolled through the hall like thunder. Final and absolute, they gasped and whimpered, their bodies bent against their will, pressed down by the force of her command. Some clawed at the invisible weight, crushing their shoulders. But their arms shook uselessly, pinned by something unseen. The chandeliers above swayed violently, scattering fractured light across their bowed heads. Her silver glow spread wider, flooding the hall until every corner was drenched in its cold brilliance. She stood over them, a lone figure towering in the storm she had become. "You built this night to break me," she said, her words vibrating in their bones. "But it is you who are broken." A man near the front let out a sob, his forehead pressed against the glass-strewn floor, blood mixed with the shards, glistening under the merciless light. She stepped closer, her heels crunching against the fragments, each step deliberate. Echoing, their breaths came in shallow bursts, as though the air itself had thinned. Her presence pressed heavier with every moment, filling the hall with a power they could not name. And when she stopped before them, her shadow stretched impossibly long, swallowing theirs whole. Asterisk. Her shadow curled across the floor, bending unnaturally, swallowing the scattered glass and crawling over their trembling forms. They lifted their eyes only for a second, then dropped them again. Unable to bear the weight of her gaze, the silver light around her pulsed once, twice, like the slow beat of a heart too vast to belong to any human. Her voice lowered, calm, steady, more terrifying than any scream. "You thought memory fades?" Her hand hovered in the air, palm open, fingers spread wide. "But I remember everything." The room shuddered, as if her words themselves carried weight. Dust raining softly from the rafters above. The puppeted figures shook, their faces pale, streaked with sweat and tears. A low moan rippled through the crowd. Not in unison, but in waves of breaking fear. She stepped into their midst. The silver glow clinging to her like armor. Every movement deliberate. The tendrils of light tightened, forcing their spines to bow further, until their foreheads nearly touched the blood-smeared floor. One woman tried to resist, groaning, her body trembling violently. Her defiance lasted only a moment before the tendrils yanked her down with brutal force. The sound of bones striking the floor cracked through the silence, and the crowd flinched as one. Her smile returned, sharper now, her voice curling around them like a noose. "You gave me scars." The light surged once more, wrapping tighter, hungrier, and I have come to give them back. The silver tendrils writhed, their glow deepening to a blinding white as they coiled higher around trembling bodies. Cries filled the hall, muffled and broken, swallowed by the crushing hum that vibrated through the walls. Her eyes reflected every drop of their terror, cold and merciless. "You wanted me to vanish," she said, her words slicing through their screams like a blade. "But I learned to grow in the dark." The floor beneath them cracked, thin lines of light bleeding upward through the polished wood. The cracks spread fast, branching like veins, spilling brilliance that threatened to split the room apart. They clutched at each other in desperation, but the light tore their shadows away, leaving them bare and exposed. She raised both hands now, her arms trembling not with weakness, but with power unrestrained. The tendrils jerked their bodies upright, then slammed them down again, forcing them to bow deeper. Glass ground beneath their skin, cutting sharp and cruel. Yet she did not waver. Her silver dress whipped violently around her, though no wind touched the room. "You laughed at my silence," she thundered, her voice resonating from ceiling to floor. "Now you will learn what silence answers with." And as her words faded, the cracks in the floor burst open, flooding the hall with a light so fierce that every scream drowned beneath its roar. The roar of the light swallowed every sound until the hall trembled like a living thing. Walls groaned, their once smooth surfaces splintering as silver radiance seeped through the cracks. The chandeliers above shattered all at once, raining down shards that never touched her. As if the light itself shielded her form, they covered their heads, but the tendrils held them in place, forcing their faces toward the blinding glow. The air thickened, hot and electric, every breath searing their lungs with the taste of metal and ash. Her figure blazed at the center, no longer just a woman, but something vast and terrible, cloaked in fire and shadow. "You made me a spectacle," she declared, her voice rolling like thunder across the broken hall. "Now you are mine to behold." Their screams fractured, some hoarse, some silent, as their strength drained beneath the crushing weight of her power. The cracks beneath them widened, swallowing whole pieces of the floor, silver light pouring upward in jagged waves. One man collapsed forward, face pressed to the searing glow. His cry cut short as the light consumed his shadow. The rest recoiled in horror, but the tendrils yanked them tighter, binding them together like prey in a web. Her smile gleamed through the radiance, calm and merciless, as if she had waited her entire life for this hour. And with one final motion of her hand, the hall itself seemed to bow with them, bending, breaking, surrendering to her will. The hall bent under her command, beams creaking as if in pain. They lay bound and blinking against the onslaught of light, faces washed raw and white. Her shadow stretched forward, swallowing the nearest table whole. Silver dust floated in the air, glittering like ash from a burned constellation. Someone whispered a name, small and useless, lost beneath the thunder of her voice. She smiled down at them, patient and terrible, as if reading from a long ledger. The sound of their breathing became a single, ragged chorus. Outside, rain began to lash the windows, each drop striking like a tiny drumbeat. The glass trembled, then sang, a high note that sharpened the edges of their fear. In the northwest corner, a portrait tilted on the wall, its frame cracking slowly. No one in the room dared look directly at the painting. Though all felt its stare, she reached out and touched the nearest bowed head with the pad of her finger. The touch left no warmth, only the impression of cold iron and distant winter. When she withdrew her hand, the person beneath it sobbed, a sound that was almost a prayer. Her lips moved again, words that tasted like salt and old rain. Behind her, something shifted in the darkness, a presence older than memory, and it watched as she spoke. Asterisk, the presence loomed, vast and unseen. Pressing against the fragile boundaries of the hall, the lights flickered, not from weakness, but as though bowing to what had arrived. Every head snapped up for a heartbeat, eyes wide, before slamming back down against the floor. Forced lower still, the air grew colder, biting, every exhale turning white in the shimmering glow. She stood unshaken, her silver light merging with the darkness behind her as if she had summoned it, or it had always been hers. The presence stirred again, and the windows rattled in their frames. Rain smearing into streaks of black against the glass. She raised her hand. Slowly, reverently, as if greeting an equal, the shadows answered. Stretching long and sharp, fingers of night reaching across the broken floor, gasps tore through the crowd as the shadows brushed their bodies. Cold and piercing. Leaving behind marks like frostbite, her voice rose, no longer human. Layered and echoing with the timbre of the presence itself. They thought me alone. The tendrils of silver light pulsed, tightening their grip on bowed shoulders and trembling arms. But I was never alone. The hall groaned once more, the ceiling cracking as plaster rained down in pale flakes. The presence expanded, filling every corner, sealing them inside a cage of shadow and light, and in that crushing stillness. She smiled, her eyes burning brighter than fire, colder than ice, asterisk. Her smile cut through the dark like a blade, sharp and unyielding. The silver glow swelled, rising from the floor in spirals that twisted like smoke given weight. The shadows obeyed, folding inward until they bowed before her form. The people trapped within shivered violently, their bodies jerking as though strings were being pulled tighter. A sound welled up low, guttural, not from one voice, but from many at once. It filled the hall, vibrating in their bones, rattling teeth in their skulls. She turned her head slightly, listening, her expression serene, as if the chorus belonged to her. You called me here with your cruelty, she said, her words sinking like stones into water, and cruelty is always answered. The windows shattered outward, spraying shards into the storm, but no rain entered. Instead, the storm itself seemed to pause, waiting. Watching, the silver spirals rose higher, twining around the chandelier's broken frame until the metal groaned. The shadows thickened, swallowing the last remaining golden glow from the walls. Now the hall was lit only by her, radiant and terrible, as if she alone held the power of dawn and dusk. She stepped forward once more, and the ground beneath her cracked wider, spilling blinding light that hissed like molten metal. The crowd cowered, their cries breaking into sobs, their bodies quaking under the weight of both shadow and flame. And in that trembling sea of fear, her voice descended again, calm, final, inescapable. You thought this night was yours. It never was. Asterisk, the hall once filled with cruel laughter and whispered schemes, now lay in ruins of silence and trembling breath. Her glow softened, the fierce silver dimming into something quieter, steadier. The shadows released their grip, retreating into the cracks of the broken floor, as though they had only ever been waiting for her command. One by one, the bowed figures lifted their heads, their eyes wide and wet, stripped of arrogance, stripped of pride. She looked at them, not with rage, but with something deeper, heavier. You will remember this night, she said, her voice no longer thunder, but steady as stone. Not for me, but for yourselves. Her steps echoed as she turned, her dress flowing like water behind her, the silver threads catching the faintest glimmer of surviving light. The storm outside calmed, the rain softening into a gentle patter against shattered windows. When she reached the doorway, the broken walls seemed to shift, opening the exit that had once vanished. She paused, her silhouette framed against the night beyond. For a moment, they thought she might look back, but she did not. She stepped into the darkness, her form fading into the rain-soaked air until she was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream, and they knew, with a weight that would never leave them, they had invited her to humiliate her. But instead, she had left them kneeling in their own shame. Asterisk.